When you asked me this question initially, can God divide himself? It's like saying, can God become something other than what he is? It doesn't make any sense because God is what he is. You cannot then put limitations and some kind of arbitrary, qualifications which is not God. Can God become ignorant? You would say, why not? Because he's powerful enough. But he's supposed to be all knowledgeable. So how can God, who is all knowledgeable, all powerful, become ignorant? It's not a paradox. This is what we say. This is a rhetorical statement with no meaning.
He can divide himself into multiple different
so there's
components.
a difference in your question now. One is God can do things, and now you're saying, can God do things on himself? Like, can God make him non-existent? Questions like this, you have to think, is it really meaningful? Like, I would go into that extreme. Is God powerful enough to make him non-existent? What do you think?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Well, why would he do it?
No, what does it even mean to make him non-existent? Does he have power enough to make him non-existent? What does it even mean?
I don't know, you tell me.
But you know what I'm saying?
So can he not divide himself into three?
When you say, it's like saying, can God make himself not God? Can the independent become not independent?
Can he exist?
How can either of us know about that?
The question that you're asking is like this. If God is by nature God, then he's not anything else. He's God. To call God, to make him divisible, to God to become non-existent, God to be not God, these are rhetorical statements which doesn't have real meaning. Because when we say God, we have a concept of that term. A God is a being who is necessary. By necessary, we mean everything else is contingent. Everything else is dependent. They could not have to exist. But God is a necessary being that has to exist. The fact that you and I exist is enough evidence for our necessary existence. And that necessary existence is God. So when we say God is a necessary being, he exists by necessity. His existence cannot be then somehow limited, subdued, or influenced by anything else.
But you're limiting God already in saying that he can't do
the
X,
fact
Y,
that
Z.
he's a necessary being, his necessary existence means anything that is contrary to that is not going to be true.
Necessary to what? If he is all powerful and
Existence is necessary.
There is nothing which limits his necessity.
His existence is necessary. His existence will be eternal and absolutely independent existence. If such a being exists, which rationality tells that must exist, a being that is independently existing with absolute existence, that being cannot be put limitation on. You cannot put a limitation or deficiency in that being. Because the moment you put the moment you put deficiency and limitation, then that is not a necessary being.
But you're presupposing that the Trinity is a limitation.
What is a Trinity?
The Trinity.
What is it?
The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
No, what exactly
It's
is
three
it?
parts going into one. It's difficult to understand.
A Trinity in a Christian belief system is there are three entities which they call persons, persona, hypostasis. Each of them is a full possessor of divinity. They're not less than divine. They're fully divine. Anything that makes God God, they have all of that. So independently, individually, distinctively, each of those persons are God. How much of God are they? Not 1/3, because if Trinity makes one God, individual member of the Trinity, they don't say they are 1/3 or 33.333%.
Yeah.
They say each member is fully God. Fully God means you are complete God. A complete God means you are one whole God, not less than one. Do you now see the problem?
No, I agree. And
so there is then
Christianity has torn itself up over this whole issue
Right.
millions of times.
So this is called the
But
logical
maybe
problem
there's
of
some
Trinity.
things- maybe there's some things that aren't supposed to be able to be understood by us. Do you know what I mean?
No. When we find things which are contradictory, irrational, we need to ask whether is this just some kind of paradox which can be resolved, or is it by necessity that we should totally reject? For example, you exist and you don't exist. You can't be both. Can there be a married bachelor?
Married bachelor. Depends how many wives you want.
No. A married bachelor cannot exist. because they are totally opposite in its meaning. If you are married, you're not a bachelor. If you're a bachelor, you're not married. You could be widowed, whatever, but you cannot be a married bachelor. A triangular circle, a non-existent existent thing. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So we're not talking about just simple paradoxes. We are talking about conceptually things which we will reject with our rationality, with our intellectual mind. So when you asked me this question initially, can God divide himself? It's like saying, can God become something other than what he is? It doesn't make any sense, because God is what he is. You cannot then put limitations and some kind of arbitrary, qualifications which is not God. Can God become ignorant? You would say, why not? Because he's powerful enough. But he's supposed to be all knowledgeable. So how can God, who is all knowledgeable, all powerful, become ignorant? It's not a paradox. This is what we say. This is a rhetorical statement with no meaning. Let me tell you why. When we agree on certain concepts, we agree on certain affirmatives, and we will reject the opposite or contrary to that. If I am happy, fully happy, then I'm not sad. That's what I mean by happy. If this is day, it is not night, by its opposite understanding of it. So sometimes we go by these opposites and we say you cannot have both at the same time. So if I'm existent, I cannot be non-existent. It's either or. So there is a binary way we can actually determine things, and we can say it's one of them is true and one of them cannot be. So they are mutually exclusive things. So there is a principle in logic, I'm sure you're very familiar with, principle of non-contradiction. We agree by this principle every day, in everyday life. We agree by it. And we live our life according to it. So we have to really, when we are examining religion, whether we are agnostics or atheists or even believers like Christians, whatever you might be, we have to be consistent in your approach. If you're going to use a set of principles, try to see whether these principles also can be applied on your belief system. Rather than you saying, I'm going to now use certain logic, only goes against the Christians and I can just debunk Christianity, but it might actually debunk Hinduism at the same time, for example. Yeah? So we have to apply consistent logic. So God, by definition, is something that is worthy of worship. And who is worthy of worship? Am I worthy of worship? Absolutely not. Are you worthy of worship? No. I mean, certain girls, because you're so handsome, might worship you. But it doesn't mean you're worthy of worship. People worship women, and don't they? People worship men because they're so beautiful, so smart, so handsome, and so on and so forth. Don't people worship pop stars, celebrities? Look at what they do. They give all their love and adoration. Adoration. To adore with all humility and so on is worship. So we are saying the only being worthy of worship is none you can imagine in this creation. Nothing. Nothing of this creation is worthy of worship. So whether it's trees or Mother Nature, whether it's thunder, the sun, whether it's, man, woman, land, politics, anything that you can imagine, none of that is worthy of worship. But the one who is worthy of worship is the one who has created all of that into existence. Because he's the one who brought us into existence. And as we know, there has to be a necessary existence. That being is what we call the originator. Badi'us samawati wal ard, the one who brought the universe into existence, heaven and the earth.